Good evening and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French. It is a big night and a huge week as the Democrats kick off their convention this evening as the presidential election enters a whole new phase. This will be a convention, frankly, like none other, as COVID has forced it to be virtual. But that is not stopping the DNC from featuring a slate of big names speaking each and every night. And we will be there every step of the way for you. From 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time each night, we'll bring you full coverage of the speeches plus expert analysis. And tonight, we're going to hear from Senator Bernie Sanders, Governors Andrew Cuomo and Gretchen Whitmer, also former Republican Ohio Governor John Kasich and Michelle Obama. Then, tomorrow night, Tuesday, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, 2004 presidential nominee John Kerry, AOC, Bill Clinton, and Dr. Jill Biden. Then on Wednesday, we hear from Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Senator Warren, Gabrielle Giffords, the VP nominee herself, Kamala Harris, and then Barack Obama. And finally, on Thursday night, Senator Cory Booker, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and Pete Buttigieg. They'll be opening acts before the man of the moment, Joe Biden, will deliver his acceptance speech. Now, as the DNC gears up, President Trump continues to ratchet up his attacks against voting by mail and also the U.S. Postal Service by extension. And that has got Democrats livid.
Our elections are sacred. Men and women have died for them and the right to vote. And to do this is disgraceful.
Nancy Pelosi, she is rallying her caucus to take action. The House Speaker, she sent a letter to fellow Democrats, and I now read a portion of it for you. Alarmingly, across the nation, we see the devastating effects of the president's campaign to sabotage the election by manipulating the Postal Service to disenfranchise voters. And Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, he's heading to Capitol Hill next week to face the music, answering questions from the House Oversight Committee. Speaker Pelosi is also dragging all lawmakers back to Washington next weekend so they can deal with this mess. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi taking the dramatic step of calling every member of the House back to Washington for a rare Saturday session this weekend to address the crisis in the U.S. Postal Service and growing questions about the November election. And Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, a Trump ally and a Republican mega-donor, he finds himself in the hot seat, accused by Democrats of trying to silence millions of voters. Democrats now calling for DeJoy to testify in an urgent hearing.
We've got to do everything we can to get rid of this new Postmaster General, who is clearly a campaign contributor for Trump, trying to undermine the Postal Service.
DeJoy, who took the office in June, he's cut overtime and changed work rules, removing dozens of mail sorting machines, leading to reported delays and curtailed service. The agency calling these changes cost-cutting measures.
Now it takes maybe like a couple of weeks to get something that used to take a day or two.
Experts now warning the degrading standards of the Postal Service are now slowing down deliveries of mail, medical prescriptions, and paychecks. Jim Gall says a reimbursement claims for his wife's medication usually takes 6 days, but recently it took 2 weeks.
We have to pay for her prescriptions and then file for reimbursement. $11,000, $12,000 is a lot of money to have outstanding on a credit card.
And the changes could be catastrophic for the November election. The Postal Service is already warning 46 states that ballots might not be delivered in time to be counted. All this as the president continues to tout baseless claims that mail-in voting leads to voter fraud.
Universal mail-in voting is going to be catastrophic. It's going to make our country a laughingstock all over the world.
Not sure that's why we'd be the laughingstock, but I showed you what Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are saying about the post office debacle. But trust me, this is not just Democrats who are upset. Many Republicans, they're also starting to speak out. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Montana's Steve Daines, they wrote to the Postmaster General telling him to immediately address the delays because it is a lifeline for millions of Americans who rely on the Postal Service for things like checks and prescriptions. And Vermont Governor Phil Scott, who's also a Republican, he had this to say.
I think this is unfortunate when you're trying to squelch the voices of Americans and squelch their opportunity to vote. I think that during these times we should be doing all we can to make sure that everyone is counted and has their voices heard through the ballot box. This is the wrong time to be pulling back.
Again, beginnings of voices from the Republican side. And also, you're starting to see more Republican governors defending the idea of mail-in voting, including Gary Herbert of Utah.
It's worked well. It gives people advance notice. They can study the issues. I think they're more informed in their voting now because of vote by mail.
I swear, sometimes I think I'm waking up in the Twilight Zone. What has happened to the country that I grew up in that some two-bit hustler who couldn't screw this country up worse if he tried, and he has, is in broad daylight, without secret, trying to take away our constitutionally protected right to vote? How are we sheep sitting in our chairs aghast that Donald Trump would try such a thing? Have you been paying any attention? Now, there's no bottom to his indecency. I mean, the guy's blackmailed allies for campaign dirt. He's turned a blind eye to an enemy who literally puts bounties on our troops. He'll traffic in racism nearly every news cycle. He'll encourage the lunatic fringe with presidential legitimacy while demeaning American heroes in the very next breath. Now, after losing more than 170,000 fellow citizens and counting, he declares victory over a growing pandemic that he claimed was all a hoax. After being exposed as unfit, unable, and even uninterested, he decided, you know what, I'm going to blame all the other kids here, and I will pass the buck to the states. And now, with every parent, student, and teacher about to enter an unknown fraught with possible life and death decisions, my president is extorting states and school districts. Same goes for tens of millions of you who have been laid off or had to stay at home with your kids when your relief check is no longer going to be enough to pay the rent, tuition, or electricity bill. You can thank your president for that. But if you are a soulless, self-interested excuse for a leader, this is to be expected. In America, there are consequences, though, for dereliction of duty and for putting self before country. They're called elections. And in this case of a presidency, every 4 years, we get to decide. And just like his never-ending list of bankruptcies, the bill will come due for the president, in this case, on November 3rd. But wait. Now, the scam artist, in desperation, he's taking this one step further. He now wants to risk your loved one's life to cast their vote. Now, he's taking your tax dollars, my tax dollars, and what's he doing? He's sabotaging our post office, and mark my words, even when he's risked millions of American voters to unnecessary COVID exposure, and even when he loses, and I believe he will fair and square, he, hysterically, hypocritically, he will then cry fraud. He will then tell his aggrieved friends in red hats that a crime has been perpetrated against not just him, but against them, their way of life, their Americana, their right to pray and bear arms will now be at risk. The division that he has exasperated to this point will look like child's play come November. But here's the thing. It does not have to be that way. We, the people, overwhelmingly do not want this. He's not just screwing with an election. His self-dealing crook of a postmaster general is also keeping senior Social Security checks from getting delivered. Medicines for our veterans are not arriving on time, and rural communities, and by the way, red states, who rely on the U.S. mail most of all, are being hurt the most. What are we doing here, Republicans? How could the party of Lincoln and Reagan ever have gotten to the point where Donald Trump bullies you into defending the indefensible? Where has your spine gone? America. The America I know has been the global leader throughout my lifetime. We've won world wars, and we've chartered a global peace. We've enjoyed unprecedented prosperity, we've led on science and space travel, and we've remade this nation after a depression. We're not perfect, but I've always believed that we have stood for something. I don't recognize my government today. My president, he champions QAnon and he demeans John Lewis. My president suggests we should inject bleach in a home remedy from the Mr. Pillow guy, but then tells Americans don't trust Dr. Fauci, science, and the medical community. My president is unilaterally deciding that my mom may have to risk her life to vote because he's afraid to let the American people decide if he should keep his job. Ben Franklin famously answered, "A democracy, if you can keep it." That's when he was asked what course the Founding Fathers had settled on. Well, let's not in any way confuse ourselves about the stakes in front of us. That test is before us. And if we let this charlatan with no substance or decency decide that we, the people, no longer decide, then you know what? We deserve what we get. All right, when we come back, a preview of the Democratic Convention coming up in less than 3 hours, including what we'll hear, what Democrats want to get across, and we also have a preview of Michelle Obama's speech for this evening.